Now say it. Where you got a short season, we only got roughly around 6 or 8 weeks of cod fishery. We try to maximize each week because you got families to feed like everybody else. You got bills, and it's very expensive to live here now. Not like it used to be. We eat a lot of seabirds, believe it or not. Turs and murres and ducks and stuff like that, seal, because that's our culture. That's what we grew up with. The brown ones is the babies. That's the young gulls. That's the ones that's good eating.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they're really good. You want to try one? I'll kill one.
No, thanks.
I'll cook it for breakfast. No. Yeah, everything's getting too expensive, and it is what it is. It's only a bird. It's like a chicken. You eat chicken, you eat a gull. Yeah, this is Newfoundland chickens, lots of them. When you're traveling this province, you go up here and go out to Morton's Harbour, up all the way down there. There's little communities with 30 people, 40 people, 10 people. And the history there is phenomenal. But there's only one family, 2 families, 3 families left. And it saddens me because the remaining ones there is like my father's age, 70s, 80s, and they don't want to see their community die till they die. And that's what's very, very sad. And right now, this is where we are.
On the far northeastern edge of Newfoundland lies Twillingate, a community spread across a group of wind-exposed islands. In the early 1700s, only about a dozen settler families lived here, exporting salted cod to markets in Spain and Portugal. A 100 years later, Twillingate had grown into one of Newfoundland's major fishing outports. And by the early 20th century, it earned the nickname the capital of the North.
As actually was French people that came here, was Twillingate. He said way, way back, the first people here all came from France. So what happened to them, I don't know. We really don't know. They just moved out or found it too rugged, or I doubt it, but they just didn't stay. No, most of the ancestors there, I mean, we know we're all from Wales or Scotland, Ireland, England. Now, the different parts of the community as you go along Newfoundland, you'll see they're Scottish or they're Irish. When you go down to French shore, you'll know there's French shore because it's all French, and it's great. It's just that multicultural. Back in the early 1800s, 1800s here, most of our ancestors that came here by ship. This is all wooded area. The old saltbox house that we grew up in that I beat down from and built my dad a new home, it was all big timbers. So I mean, everything here was great land, a lot of farmland. Everybody wanted to stay, you know what I mean? So I mean, it's all connected up. This island, then you got Newer Island, then we got Cottle's Island. It's all islands, and everybody moved further in the bays. Most of the concentration was out here.
The following century brought significant changes. Railways altered trade patterns across Newfoundland. Cod stocks declined. And in July 1992, the Northern Cod Moratorium struck the community hard. Many fishing families were forced to leave, moving to the mainland in search of work. The population decreased, and many once active fish stages and wharves fell silent. In 2024, as cod stocks showed meaningful recovery, the moratorium was officially lifted. Fishing is becoming an important part of local life again.
Back in the 70s and 80s here, it was very tough. There was limited amount of fish, a lot of people fishing. so nobody would make no living. We had that going to the mid-80s, early 90s, and then the moratorium hit, and then bang, our island shut down. We had 6,000 people there, and it dropped right down to 2,500 because people had to move away. Moved to Ontario mostly because we had family up there, or, you know. And now is a gradual flow, my age, the 50s, that's willing to come back, buy houses, start small businesses. I can't say we got enough people in the fishery, but it's a healthy living for people that are there.
In Newfoundland and Labrador, most fishermen stay close to their home communities, working the same waters their families have known for generations. But even so, established rules set by the federal authorities help keep things fair and balanced for everyone. Commercial fishermen can't just drop their nets wherever they want. They need a license, and they're assigned a specific spot, called a berth, where their trap nets can be set. These places are officially designated so boats don't crowd each other or fight over the same stretch of water.
Now say it. Now when it's ready, will.
3 holes in the ground.
In the shallow waters where we're fishing now, mostly codfish, herring, mackerel, squid, or calamari, but that's in the inshore waters. And we have crab as well, lobster. And in the offshore we have turbot and shrimp. That's where the bigger boats, that's where they go. There's 50 fathoms, it is 300 feet, net is the maximum that a fisherman is allowed to use a cod net. And we're allowed to use 6 nets, so that's what the DFO would allow us. The mesh size in this one is 6.5 inches. That's the maximum. We're allowed 7, but that's basically the maximum amount of size for fish. You could go smaller, but there's so much abundance of fish right now, we use the bigger stuff.
To protect marine resources, the federal government sets an annual total allowable catch, a quota that limits how much of each species can be harvested in every region. That quota is then divided among the licensed inshore fleets that fish with fixed gear.
This morning when we left to come out here, we only got a set quota. So every week they give us 3,300 pounds of raw product to catch. And so you come out this morning, we needed 300 more pounds or so to finish up our quota for the week. And so you put out one net, hoping that you're only going to get 200 or 300 pounds, but you never know what you're going to get. And as you can see this morning, we have quite a bit of fish, and we still got a lot of net in the haul yet, so that's good. And for us, like I said, where you got a short season, we only got roughly around 6 or 8 weeks of cod fishery, so you got to take the best out of it while it's there. So, and we try to maximize each week because you got families to feed like everybody else. You got bills, and it's very expensive to live here now. Not like it used to be. Years ago, when we were fishing back in the 80s and 90s, we used to harvest our fish every day, but we just used to pull it aboard, throw it inside the boat. The way the regulations have got now in the last 15, 20 years, you're mandatory to harvest your fish, bleed it, and gut it right away at sea. That way then it'll give a better quality and more refreshed amount of codfish. And that's why we do it. It's a little bit harder in the smaller boats like this, but in the small longliners and stuff, it's quite easy to do. You just set up a table, you can have it easy to do, right? So this is the reason for it.
In these waters, the abundant schools of capelin, a small fish, and the cod's favorite food, have made the recent massive recovery of cod possible, leading to the impressive catches we see today.
There you go.
How big is it?
I say it's about 35, 40 pounds, approximate. Right now in this area we have a lot of capelin on the bottom, so that's why there's so much fish. A lot of the fish now, they got, where the capelin are so fresh, they're heating it off the bottom. So that capelin was still actually alive there a couple of minutes ago. And now they're just spitting it out as it comes to the surface. The codfish are eating a lot of the capelin right now, and it's giving us a very healthy codfish. They're very fat. As you can tell, they got a very wide back. This is what makes it nice and a very hittable fish. It's a healthy product. Oh, you sonny boy. Now this is what I tell you about a flounder. It's a completely different species. Very, very tasty. The flesh on it is very oily. A lot of omega-3, very good tasty fish. We do eat some when we get a chance, but for the most part we release it back. Hopefully it'll breed and we'll get another fishery in the next few years. So there's a lot about conservation as well. In the winter times there's very limited things to be done. Well, mostly we're doing then is repairing our gear, our crab pots and lobster pots, and our gill nets, getting it all ready for the spring, because everything comes in season. That usually takes you a couple months. And then we do some moose hunting for the most part. Something we enjoy as Newfoundlanders, as a delicacy for us people. You go in a draw, and every year they harvest 29,000 moose in the province, and we go in a draw system, and usually every 3 years you get a license. There's about 100,000 people every year that go for the moose, and so about approximately every 3 years you'll get a license. Sometimes you might be lucky to get it 2 years in a row, but not very often.
In Newfoundland, there were difficult periods when the fish harvest simply couldn't sustain the population. In their struggle against hunger, people had to turn to other means of survival. One of the most important alternatives was the hunting of seabirds and wild game, a practice that, over time, became deeply rooted in their culture and way of life.
We eat a lot of seabirds, believe it or not. Turs and murres and ducks and stuff like that, seal, because that's our culture. That's what we grew up with. In the last few years, you're not allowed to kill them anymore. But when we grew up here as kids, we eat hundreds of them. The brown ones is the babies. That's the young gulls. That's the ones that's good eating.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they're really good. You want to try one? I'll kill one.
No, thanks.
I'll cook it for breakfast. No. Yeah, every year up here on the island, especially on the Mouse Island, you see that little round island up here.
Yeah.
Most of the gulls, they hatch their eggs every year on that island. And now due to the fishery the way it is, the gulls are really coming back because there's so much food for them, especially us out here feeding them every day. But one of these days there's going to get to a point in time on Earth again, you'll be eating them again, I guarantee it. Something got to give. Yeah, everything's getting too expensive, and it is what it is. It's only a bird, it's like a chicken. You eat chicken, you eat a gull. Yeah, this is Newfoundland chickens, lots of them.
the taste from the time then you are eating them?
You know what, a gall is similar, the meat is between a pork and a chicken. Is it like a half brown? So it's just really tasty. It is, believe it or not.
I'm not sure.
No, boy. Now we're going to go in.
Alongside the commercial fishery, Newfoundland allows a short seasonal period for catching ground fish, including cod. For a limited number of days, anyone may fish without a license, using hand lines only and within strict daily limits. The catch can't be sold, but for many families, it remains a living tradition, tied to food, survival, and a life shaped by the sea.
As you see, we've got a local guy out just catching a bit of fish for his own personal use. In the food fishery here every week, we have 3 days a week that you're allowed to go out. Anybody can leave the wharf, and you're allowed 5 fish each per day for 3 days a week, which is a great thing even for the tourists that's coming here to get a chance to go out and get that experience hand lining, and yeah, it's really, very nice.
In Newfoundland, those who live by the sea must earn a full year's living in just 20 to 25 weeks, often at the mercy of the weather. Before dawn, the fishermen begin their day, hauling, processing, packing, hour after hour. A single day can stretch to 15 hours or more. The season is short, and every day counts.
So we daily, every morning, we go out and harvest our fish, and we come in, and as you could tell, I got a few guys there filleting it, make sure it's clean properly. There's a little bit of a process to it, as you could tell. So what we do here on the filleting table, we cut to the bone, you take the fin off, you turn your fish, and you poke it through. You cut it very slowly because I don't want to get you in a mess. You fold your fillet up like this, cut it, turn it, and this is your fillet. Right now, all that's left in this fillet is one bone. It's called a pin bone. We also take this out, and we cut off the belly. So what you end up with then is a perfectly clean piece of fish. Top notch, you can't beat it any better than that. So what we do from this part of it, we take it through the skinning machine. What this machine does, it pulls the skin completely off. So I'll just fire it up, give you a little demonstration. You put it on the belt, and this is how it comes out. 100% clean. So you follow it in the water, and this is what we got. Look, beautiful. Can't get any better than that. So what we do then, after we wash it, we bring it over to the tables, and what we do, we cut it up in portions like this, ready for the table. Perfectly sized portions for a meal for one person, and that's what we try to look. Isn't that gorgeous? This phenomenal looking fish. And what we do is from here, we put them in the bags. We usually put 1 kilo in a bag, like this, and then we bring it to the vacuum packer. We bring it over, and slam the hood, and this is what you end up with. Like this. Ready for market. So we put it on the rocks, and then we put it in the blast freezer. So this is what you end up with, the best quality we could give you. Right now we run a lot of product to Labrador City, Goose Bay and that. And we getting a lot of response from New Brunswick. Here you go. And there you come up, and this is what we got. Look. Just perfect quality fish. That's enough for a family of 2 or 3. All depends if you're big like me.
When winter settles over this island, the boats are pulled ashore and the harbors fall quiet. The rhythm of life softens, and work beneath the open sky grows scarce. And yet for those whose days are bound to the sea, true rest never fully arrives.
Winter here is very, very struggling. When we grew up here as kids, everything here was frozen. So far out in the bay as you could see. Every day was beautiful, all calm, what we call all calm, snowing, big storms. Sometimes it take you a week to open up the roadways there. We had what we call a northeaster, and you'll get it for 3 days, 4 or 5 days, complete blizzards. Actually, when we grew up in the whole salt box house we had here on the hill, I used to get out the top window and slide on the roof and get out on the snowbanks. So that's how much snow used to be here on this bay. I mean, you get 10 feet, 12 feet, 14 feet in a storm. And what we get now is a lot of wind, very, very intense wind every day. Not fit. We have a lot of snow still, but it don't last. It just, because you got the hot weather, cold, and we have these big storms that sweep in for 2 days, and then bang, we get warm weather again. But it is rough. It's tough weather here. And not only that, in the winter times there's very limited things to be done. But we get stuff ready for the fishery in the spring. That's what all the fishermen are doing. We spend 3-4 months upgrading our boats, fixing up our gear, and that's part of our culture, I guess, as well, right? The reason why it was salt boxes down years ago, whatever they had for making nets and stuff like that, if they had salt and everything was downstairs, they actually lived upstairs. So it was very different lifestyle. Not like today. People don't do that, hey. But here, that's what they used to have. They'd be mending their nets or picking birds or whatever they had was downstairs. And you had to do it. It was just a tough lifestyle. But you had to see it to really understand it, right?
Here, in this community, and across Newfoundland and Labrador, people have survived over the past decades, largely on what little remained of the fishery. And today, even as the fishery slowly finds its footing again, the deeper structure of community and culture continues to shift. As the younger generation moves away, leaving behind the inherited rhythms and traditions that once shaped this place, newcomers from far beyond its shores arrive, buying homes and quietly altering a way of life forged over centuries.
Right now, the younger generation, most of them are leaving, going and getting educated in St. John's, which is great as well. Some are coming back, but the majority are just moving on. It seems like the only generation is the ones that stay there. They're staying and they're not leaving. They're just stubborn old mules, I guess. But it is what it is. But it's very difficult to watch when you're rooted, I call it, when you're rooted to a community like myself. You see your community going down and down and down. Local people. Now we get an influx of people that's buying up properties there from all over the world, which is great as well, but they don't mingle like us. Is this a difference? I guess they're more afraid, or where they come from, they never done like we do. Because we mingle with anybody. We don't care. We're just happy-go people, and that's the way it's supposed to be, right?
As younger generations leave in search of more secure work, the future of small fishing villages grows increasingly uncertain. The cod moratorium stripped these communities of most of their population. Those who left have not returned, and those who remain are too few to restore the fragile balance. Without renewal or support, it is difficult to believe these small communities will survive into the next generation.
Right now, our communities outside the little bigger centers are forced out because you're at a aged population. Right now, with the baby boomers that we've had throughout the years, all their kids my age then, 50s, early 60s, late 40s, all moved out of the communities, and they're not going back. They'll keep their historical home. It just more or less is a summer time thing. But and the government's is making it so difficult for businesses to start in these smaller communities. They don't want it. They just don't want it. They want, which is understandable. They don't have to reach out and do so much stuff. But I mean, it's sad when you travel this province, and you will see, when you're traveling this province, you go up here and go out to Morton's Harbour, up to Western Ed, all the way down there, there's little communities with 30 people, 40 people, 10 people. And the history there is phenomenal. But there's only one family, two families, three families left. And it saddens me because the remaining ones there is like my father's age, 70s, 80s, and they don't want to see their community die till they die. And that's what's very, very sad. And right now, this is where we are.
Despite the economic and social changes that have reshaped Newfoundland over the past 3 decades, the community of Twillingate remains deeply connected to its cultural roots. People here value a slower rhythm, strong friendships, and the distinctive hospitality for which Island is known. It is no surprise, then, that Twillingate hosts one of only 5 dinner theatres in Newfoundland, a venue long regarded as one of the province's most respected.
I had a different idea. How can we do a dinner theatre where we're making fun of each other, skits and drama, and a lot of Newfoundland traditional music? So I built the dinner theatre and just kept that history that I grew up here in the community, right? And what we do, like you said, every night we serve a meal. You have, well, right now the lobsters is off because we have a limited season, but we do cod, salmon, or chicken dinner, plus a 2-hour show every night, 6 days a week. And it usually starts around 6 o'clock. We start preparing the meal and get it out of the kitchen, serve everybody by 7:30, hopefully, got everybody on stage and start doing their show. So what we do then, to get up and do a few songs and a few skits. Like I said, Newfoundlanders making fun of Newfoundlanders like we always do. So this is a big, big thing for us here.
There's a story I've heard lots of old people say. There's a picture of beauty far out in the bay, where the sun fills each morning and the stars are so bright. The sea seems to smile with delight this morning you've given up drinking cow's milk and you've switched 100% to goat's milk.
Oh, I'll never drink cow's milk again.
Really?
No.
So tell us now, have you noticed a difference so far?
At the northern edge of Twillingate Island rises Long Point, a high headland with commanding views over Notre Dame Bay. In 1876, Newfoundland's colonial government built a lighthouse here. Its primary purpose was to support the daily work of this coast, guiding vessels toward Twillingate's harbor and along the fishing routes that shaped the town into a regional maritime center. The lighthouse remains active today, continuing to serve local navigation by casting its light up to 16 miles out to sea. But in recent decades, Long Point has become one of the region's most recognized landmarks. In spring and early summer, Cap Long Point turns into a front-row seat to one of nature's great journeys. From the heights of Long Point's cliffs, vast icebergs can be seen drifting south from Greenland, moving through the corridor known as Iceberg Alley. It is this rare combination of geography, elevation, and open ocean that has earned Twillingate its reputation as the iceberg capital of the world. The story of Twillingate is not unique. It reflects a broader logic shaped by Newfoundland's geography. In the mid-1930s, when Newfoundland was still under British rule, the island became a strategic hinge between Europe and North America. As transatlantic aviation pushed the limits of distance and endurance, the British Air Ministry searched for a place where aircraft could land, refuel, and survive the North Atlantic's unforgiving weather. This is where Gander began, a town whose origins stand apart in Canadian history. Born directly from aviation, not from the sea, not from trade, and not as a traditional commercial center, but shaped by strategic necessity.
Gander was formed as a result of the 1935 Conference for Aviation across the Atlantic. It was held in Montreal, and it had Canadian officials and British officials, and they were discussing the future of transatlantic flight. So they wanted to build an airport. Now at this time, there were no aircraft capable of flying across the North Atlantic. And so this was like really frontier stuff. And the government of Newfoundland had purchased 2 aircraft. It's called a Fox Moth. It's a de Havilland. It's a fairly rare aircraft, very interesting. And here are the skis from the aircraft. This aircraft was actually transferred to the Royal Canadian Air Force as a gift from the Newfoundland government for the war effort. Here, you've got Miss Douglas Fraser was flying it. So he was the guy who I said found the airport. Now he's got a couple of interesting stories about him. He's apparently very difficult to work with. And he considered this aircraft, which he flew for years and years and years, as basically his. Now, a story that happened, so there was a lot of men here, right? And it was Friday night, but there's not very many women here. So Douglas Fraser and one of his buddies stole a train, brought it to Grand Falls, which is 60 miles. It's where the pulp and paper mills, loaded up with women and brought them back here for a dance on Friday night without any authorization. So that's sort of what he's like. He also, when he was told to give the aircraft to Canada, and the RCAF stole the aircraft and flew it to St. John's. And he was ordered to bring it back. So what he did was he dismantled it, put it on a railway car, and he tied a big black ribbon around it, because at that point, that was the last aircraft that Newfoundland owned. So that was like the death of aviation. in Newfoundland as it went back to Canada. So.
The construction of the airport stretched over nearly 3 years, involving thousands of Canadian workers brought in from the mainland. But welcoming so many people so quickly to a place that was nearly uninhabited soon proved to be a difficult challenge. For the officials, it was a burden. For the locals, it was a chance. Shops adapted, kitchens grew busier, the quiet rhythm of village life shifted, answering the sudden pulse of demand.
This place was opened in 1938, but it was conceived in 1935, and as part of that, it was built by a Canadian construction firm from Montreal called Atlas Construction. Now, when they came here, there was 5,000 people here working with all their heavy equipment and building all this infrastructure. Now, they needed to be fed, so when they were first getting here, they were getting their bread from St. John's on the train. Now, if you know the train in Newfoundland, it was called the Newfie Bullet. And that's a sarcastic name because it was so slow. And by the time the bread got here, it was like either wet or damp, and it was no good. So they were trying to figure out what they do. And some of the workers that were here were local, and they'd worked for a lumber company, happened to be my grandfather's and his brothers, called J. Goodyear and Sons. And they loved the bread that they were getting over there. So they, that company got a contract, or my grandparents' company got a contract to feed the 5,000 here. And so they were here over the war. And my grandfather said, yeah, we had a $4 million contract and lost money. So not too hard. They had to give certain things. So while they were here, they had they had 6 stores here. They had a canteen, like a regular store, and they actually had the first self-serve grocery store east of Montreal, where you could go in, and before that, everything was behind the counter, and you would say what you wanted, and the person would get it to you, and they would put it together, and they wrap it up, and they give it to you. So they still had sort of that feel to it.
With the outbreak of the Second World War, Gander's airport became a vital strategic hub for the British military, funneling tens of thousands of Allied aircraft across the Atlantic toward Europe. Its wartime role drove rapid expansion, infrastructure, housing, and services, bringing the population to several thousand military and civilian personnel and transforming Gander almost overnight.
This is a model of the Gander Airport as it existed in 1950. Now, it's very similar to what existed in 1940 throughout the war, and you'll notice some very odd things about it. First of all, these runways look awfully large. That's because they had no idea what an aircraft would require to land after a transatlantic flight, or what kind of landing systems they have. So these runways are 600 feet wide. This is the largest airport in the world at the time based on surface area of asphalt. During the war, this became a hub of aviation, and it was extremely important. Churchill called it the largest aircraft carrier in the world in the North Atlantic. It was extremely important. At that time, they weren't sure if the Germans could actually do an invasion into North America, and if they did, this would be where they're coming. So there was an entire regiment of infantry. Additionally, but around this entire place, there was 900 anti-aircraft artillerymen to protect the base from air attack or invasion. Post-war, a lot of these places were used for housing. Now, some people call this the old town site. Now, if you talk to anyone who lived there, they get really angry if you do that. But this would be barracks that were used for workers who came into Gander, because now you had an airport here. It brought a lot of people in. Before the war, or during the war, there were very few Newfoundlanders here. In fact, there's a street right here. You see these little, that street is the only Newfoundlanders here. There's mostly doctors and very specialized people that could help out here.
With the war over, Gander was forced to redefine itself and adapt to civilian life. Some wartime structures were repurposed, others dismantled. Yet a small military presence remained. As the Cold War emerged, Gander's communications facilities quietly took on a new mission, one that would endure far longer than the conflict that had created the town.
The war ended, they took down all the buildings, and the RCAF disappeared. The only thing left in Gander that was military was the communications intelligence world. Now that got bigger and bigger during the Cold War because essentially we're spying on Russia, we want to hear what they're doing. So we have a place in town called the Turkey Farm, which is just a name. It's a massive antenna array, and there was lots of people working there during the 60s and 70s, and that's about all I can tell you. And 80s, and then I guess they automated a bunch of it and just rerouted communications, but there's still a whack of people there, and it's still doing apparently interesting things up there. But that was all part of the Cold War. Now, this aircraft you see behind me is a CF-100 Voodoo. It was designed as a Cold War air interceptor, was the radar operator in the back, and there's a pilot up front. And they would go and intercept Russian Bear bombers. They also carried nuclear weapons. Now, we didn't have the nuclear weapons in Gander, as far as I know, but they did have them in Comox, and they were loaned to us by the United States to use. So this aircraft carried a nuclear missile to intercept a large formation of Bear bombers. And basically, they would fly at 40,000 feet. They would find the formation, and they would launch this missile, and they'd pull a 6G diving turn away because it only went like 11 miles, and then it went big ball of sunshine. And yeah, that's what it was designed for. And that was the Cold War. These were flown until the early 80s and replaced by the F-18. And you could do tons of things to talk about Cold War stories, but we were part of that. So was Labrador, actually. The US-based B-29s there with nuclear bombs at one point. Now, today's world, we're still important strategically, and it's because of location. Everything, this is all about geography. This whole place is here because of where it is. And even today, big, heavy military transports come through here all the time on the way to Europe or back from Europe.
On September 11th, 2001, when the terrorist attacks in the United States forced the closure of American airspace, 38 international flights bound for the US were diverted to Gander. Over the course of that day, more than 9,000 passengers and crew arrived at its airport, almost doubling the city's population. A number large enough to matter, and a challenge immense enough to test the limits of any place.
38 aircraft landed here, and there was close about that many into a town of like 9,000 people. And they were spread out all over, not just Gander, but out towards Lewisport and Gambo. The whole area just sort of picked up and came to help all these people who became known as the airplane people, because they spent 3 days here before they were allowed to fly again, and they didn't have to pay for anything. People brought them into their homes. And it's all because of 9/11, the terrorist attack in New York City, of course, on the Twin Towers. Now, these strips here represent all the aircraft that landed in Gander on September 11th, okay? These were ones that were in the air. Now, we don't get a lot of air traffic here now, but back in the 50s, right after the war, there would be hundreds of flights a day, because if you draw a line directly between New York and London, we're right on that Great Circle route. So this is a place for gas, either on the way across or on the way back.
Long known as the crossroads of the world, the legacy of Gander's airport is preserved today at the North Atlantic Aviation Museum, located just beside the runways that once connected continents. But out in the open, where historic aircraft stand exposed to wind, rain, and time, part of that legacy is slowly being worn away. Their story is told to us with quiet sadness by someone whose life has been shaped by flight. and who understands what is at risk of being lost.
So I was in the Air Force for 39 years. The first 31, I was all over the country, and the last 9, I left the regular forces and joined the reserves, and I joined here at 9 Wing to be the heritage officer. In the future, the museum is trying to expand because we have a beautiful aircraft outside. There's only 6 left in the world that are in that condition, and every year it gets worse because it's outside. This is the prize of NAM's collection. It is a Hudson bomber, and not this particular aircraft, but there was a group of 7 of these that wanted to do a proof of concept flight by crossing the North Atlantic as a group. So they left here and arrived the next day. It wasn't great weather. The group got broken up. They became separated, but they all eventually got there. But it was really problematic because they only had 1 air navigator and the rest were pilots and a radio operator. And so after that, they decided, because they got lost, that all the transatlantic flights would have operators. Now you have to remember that at this time, only 50% of aircraft that have ever tried to cross the Atlantic succeeded. So this was a big deal. And these were also used as anti-submarine aircraft because they had a fairly long range. So they would carry a bomb depth charge in a bomb bay. And here they had a room for a navigator bombardier in the nose, a couple of pilots and a radio operator. You see on the top the long string, that would have been what they call high frequency radar. It's long range communications, which can go, depending on the time of day and the height of the stratosphere, can cross an ocean. So what the aircraft I want to talk about now is best known as a PBY or Canso. It had retractable gear, whereas the other one was more of a flying boat. So this could land on water easily, was used for search and rescue, and mainly for hunting submarines as well. It had a pretty good range, but again, couldn't close that, what we call the pit, in the middle of the North Atlantic. And they were involved in many searches here because we would lose an aircraft over the water and they would go out and try and rescue people. So post-war, as you can imagine, this is a very useful and interesting aircraft, and a lot of them had other lives. Right after the war, this was purchased by Eastern Provincial Airways, or EPA, which used to be based from Gander, and this was a passenger aircraft. After they were finished with it, the Newfoundland government purchased a bunch of them and converted them to what you're looking at here, which is the water bomber conversion. So it's a bit different. They hollowed out the inside to put big tanks of water, and they put a little tiny scoop on the bottom so they could land and take off. They're perfectly made for water bombers because they can land almost anywhere. Because of that big fat wing you see on top, it can fly at 30 miles an hour, which is super slow. It actually can fly backwards if the wind's strong enough. It's super slow, a lot of fun to fly for those who flew it, but busy times. But the one thing is, these aircraft are outside. They were made 80 years ago. And it's aluminum, and although aluminum is fairly resistant, the parts of them are fabric, like some of the control surfaces, and they get done. It's been repaired a few times, but ultimately these aircraft should go inside, and it's a big project for the museum is to find a home so we can bring these aircraft where they deserve to be, in a large facility that properly tells their story and allows it to be seen for generations to come.
Set between 2 continents, Newfoundland stood for nearly 3 centuries at the crossroads of worlds. Its position made it important, drawing people, trade, and rapid growth, shaped by the sea and the need to bridge worlds. But time changed the rules. As distances ceased to matter and progress removed barriers, the island's strategic role gradually disappeared. The world's interest shifted elsewhere, and Newfoundland was forced to reconsider its place. Now, the island struggles to adapt to the present. Along the coast, living in a fragile balance, small fishing communities still follow a way of life shaped by the ocean. But their boats are growing fewer, a quiet sign that in the years ahead, this once familiar sight risks fading away. On this spectacular island where history once passed in haste and the future remains uncertain, the present struggles to preserve its own identity, making Newfoundland Canada's most wild and stunning island.